Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for this webinar, the LA Retrofit Accelerator, LARA, funding 100% clean energy for 100% of Angelenos. I am Tim Kawahara, Executive Director of the UCLA Ziman Center for Real Estate, a multidisciplinary research center at the UCLA Anderson School of Management and the UCLA School of Law. Today's event is made possible by a partnership with SCAMF in collaboration with LARA and the Ziman Center, in particular the center's Levine program for housing and social responsibility. Thank you to SCAMP for participating as co-host of this event, and we hope its members find this program informative as we collectively strive to best serve low-income and unhoused residents in our region. As many of you know, UCLA is deeply engaged in addressing affordable housing through education, research, and public service. We are grateful for the relationship we enjoy with SCAMP and its leadership, including Alan Greenlee and Jeanette Brown. Similarly, we have enjoyed a long-standing relationship with the leaders of LARA, notably Dave Hodgins and Madhavi Kumar, and the Los Angeles Better Buildings Challenge. We have partnered on numerous programs and academic activities over the years, and we look forward to doing many more. I would like to acknowledge them, as well as my colleague Julie Lindner, for organizing today's program. We have put together a webinar that we hope you will find both informative and will inspire you to action. It will focus on retrofitting buildings to meet our environmental goals and developing financing mechanisms to facilitate this work. The webinar will feature two terrific and expert speakers, Megan Ross, Climate Advisor, NRDC, and Mayor's Office of Sustainability, City of Los Angeles, and of course, Dave Hodgins, Founder and Interim Executive Director, LA Retrofit Accelerator, LARA, and Executive Director, LA Better Buildings Challenge, or LABBC. As a matter of introduction, and to get a sense of our audience this afternoon, we thought we would start by having a poll that will be 1 in 4 throughout the day. But if we could put that poll question up, and then we'll share the results in a few seconds here. Thank you.
All right, looks like I'm going to end the poll now.
Great.
Here's the results.
Great. I got a sign that said panelists couldn't vote, so I didn't realize we had restricting voting rights in here in California, but I guess that's the case. Well, that's great. It looks like a good mix of folks across the industry. And once again, thank you for joining. We probably realize this is your millionth Zoom session over the last month or so. So thanks again for joining us. I now have the great pleasure of introducing our first speaker, who will offer some framing remarks. As I mentioned earlier, Megan Ross is a climate advisor to the Office of Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti, which means she might be heading to Mumbai pretty soon, working in partnership with American Cities Climate Change and NRDC. Within the Mayor's Office of Sustainability, she works on policies and programs focused on buildings and energy, including decarbonization pathways, energy benchmarking and performance standards, and energy efficiency and incentives. And with that, Megan, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Tim. And don't worry, guys, I'm not going anywhere. I can't vouch for anyone else, but I'm staying put here. As Tim mentioned, my name's Megan Ross, and I work with the LA Mayor's Office of Sustainability in partnership with the American Cities Climate Challenge and NRDC. And as the climate advisor for buildings in the Mayor's Office, it felt helpful today for me to share some context for the city's climate action goals and plans and how building retrofits take part in that, and also share some co-benefits and opportunities of energy efficiency in the built environment that have been highlighted by some community-supported research here in LA. Our city's climate goals are stated in LA's Green New Deal, which was our 2019 edition of the city's sustainability plan. And these goals are centered in a transformation that we call the 5 zeros up here on the screen. A zero carbon grid, zero carbon buildings, zero carbon transportation, zero waste, and zero wasted water. And LA's Green New Deal uses science-based milestones for change that is designed to reduce emissions enough to keep global warming below the 1.5 degree threshold. Essentially, it calls for the city to make deep reductions across these sectors in the short term to reduce our city's carbon emissions 50% by 2025 and to be fully carbon neutral by 2050. Great news, as you'll see here, there's a crossed out 2045 to 2035 because we just sped up our timeline for a zero carbon grid, thanks to the findings of LADWP's LA100 study on renewable energy. We will have 100% clean energy in our municipal grid by 2035, 10 years ahead of the state-led goal. All 5 of these sectors are interrelated in contributing to our carbon neutrality pathway. So next slide, Madhavi. I'll talk about our buildings. So our buildings goals work in special connection with our grid goals and our water goals. By 2030, all newly built buildings in the city will be net zero carbon. And by 2050, we'll transform all of our existing buildings to net zero carbon as well. Much of that is going to be made possible by clean electricity at the electrical outlet, but efficiency gains and decarbonization are a big part of it too. And reducing our energy use intensity and water use intensity are all part of these efficiency gains that we'll need to manage resources sustainably and to stay in line with our climate commitments. Next slide. The good news is that the city's not working alone on energy and water efficiency, thank goodness, because there's a lot that we can do. Other groups have come forward to highlight the benefits and the opportunities of saving energy. When the Green New Deal was released, the Energy Efficiency for All Coalition studied and reported on what kind of building improvements would save energy and water in multifamily housing, and how those improvements would both benefit Angelenos and benefit the climate. And this graphic is taken from a study called Advancing a Green New Deal for Los Angeles Renters, which was the product of input from coalition members like the California Housing Partnership Coalition or Corporation, Global Green, LA Alliance for a New Economy, or LANE, the Natural Resources Defense Council, and Elevate Energy. Next slide. Ensuring that renters in multifamily housing can access these energy savings has huge benefits. Tens of millions of dollars could be saved in utility bills. Hundreds of thousands of tons of carbon dioxide could be saved, all by installing heat pumps for space heating and water heating, by insulating pipes to reduce heat loss, by making lighting improvements, all these kinds of retrofits that the Retrofit Accelerator will be geared toward. One of the coalition's key recommendations in this report was for LADWP to establish a one-stop shop to increase access to these energy saving opportunities. And that need is what the LA Retrofit Accelerator is grounded in. Next slide. Making building improvements across a huge sector like housing has really significant economic and job-related outcomes. Inclusive economics studied the impacts of building decarbonization in Los Angeles that were centered around community concerns, jobs, and economic change. The study looked at the potential for change across all building sectors, but within just the affordable housing sector alone, retrofitting all these types of buildings in Los Angeles could create up to 70,000 job years. Or if you think about implementing these actions over the course of a decade or so, you're supporting new careers for, say, 5,000 to 7,000 people, not temporary jobs. And you're catalyzing local investments in the range of $11 billion to $23 billion. Lots of other studies have shown how building decarbonization paired with energy efficiency can also reduce energy burden and improve health outcomes, particularly in low-income communities. It's really important to remember that equitably realizing these benefits requires complementing policies and other types of protections and incentives for the housing sector and for workforce equity. So what we're talking about today doesn't stand alone in that overall portrait, but it is a fundamental part of how these pieces complement each other, and it's a good platform to stand on. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dave so that he can share a little bit more about how this LA Retrofit Accelerator, which is this one-stop shop, can take us forward. As Tim noted before, Dave is the executive director of the LA Better Buildings Challenge and Sustento Group. He's been partnering with LADWP for many, many years, and he and I collaborate all the time on everything we're talking about today. How to improve delivery of energy incentives, where are the gaps, how do we fill them, and what is the LA Retrofit Accelerator going to do? Dave, take it away.
What are we going to do? Thank you, Megan, and thank you, Tim, and everybody for joining this afternoon. Everybody is slammed these days, and there's so much information out there. And so we appreciate your time, and we really are trying to do a good job of consolidation, making all of this simpler, because we do need to accelerate. LA 100 is a landmark study that was commissioned by LADWP at the behest of council, carried out by the National Renewable Energy Lab, and recently delivered, launched coincidentally on the day of an event we were doing around net zero energy, charts a pathway, a real pathway. And as you hear Council Member O'Farrell, who introduced the motion, talk about it, this is not about some future utopia. This is a work plan for a city that is in trouble, okay? So let's let that sink in for a second. This passed Council 12-0 last week, and it shows that this is possible. This is possible. We have the technology now. We have the information now. We know where to go. We have the money. It's a matter of connecting the dots and all of us engaging, because a huge part of this is human and the friction, and it's these old structural issues that all of us have been kind of grinding against, and this is the start of change. This announcement by council puts us in alignment with President Biden's target to be 100% clean by 2035. Now that's 10 years ahead of schedule from the prior plan. And you see, a trend if you're watching this in the news, as I do, these commitments are getting more aggressive almost week by week as we learn more and pay attention to what's coming out of IPCC. So we all need to get engaged. One more, factoid. We've studied this, right? We know where we're at relative to our goal, and we're not doing very well. According to ACEEE, they're kind of the gurus on this stuff. We need to 5x the rate of retrofits that are happening naturally. And we all understand the factors that are driving that rate of retrofit, right? That rehab. So how can we integrate more resiliency, more efficiency? And this isn't a future conversation anymore. This is now. This is now. People need access to good, indoor air, as well as cooling. As we're dealing with record heat, more people spending still a lot of time at home, kids at home. People need to be able to sleep, study, perform at work. So this is, the decade of action, as they say, and we have a plan that says that this is possible without blackouts and without any economic disruption. So that is a quote I wrote down here from the report. That's pretty exciting. As Megan alluded, a big part of that's going to come through supply, right? Through generation and the move away from fossil fuels and towards more renewables, and using energy more intelligently with batteries and microgrids and so forth. We need to prepare our buildings for that. Our buildings are not prepared to plug into that infrastructure, and buildings are that connection point. And that's what's exciting. And we know that there's also tremendous need around just addressing habitability issues and getting nasty materials and and making sure that units are accessible and so forth, functional for the residents as part of this too. So this is no small thing, but the solutions go together. And I'm very excited about to share what we have pulled together so far with you all and get your input and hopefully your engagement. So next slide, please. So before I start, you guys are the practitioners in the field. You've got, projects that you want to do. I'm not, naive. These projects are hard. So what are the biggest barriers that you see? And please do, participate in these polls. This helps us. We're going to take all of this information back. We're going to look at everything that you guys share, and it'll go into our report back to the city and the utilities and our other partners. So don't overthink it. Just and you can choose multiple choice means you can choose more than one. I cannot vote.
We are at 58% voted, so I'll just give it a few more seconds and then end the poll.
Do we have like a Jeopardy song or something? Okay.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll and share results.
Capital. Resounding. Capital and complexity. Wonderful. Thank you. That's very clear. I'm actually surprised. Interesting. Excellent. So as Megan said, the IFA study a few years back really did a good job of characterizing the landscape at the time, the programs that were available to you all to help you on your projects. And it was admittedly not great at the time. A big part of my job, my team's job, is to market the incentive programs that the utilities offer to customers and help to drive participation, try to help everybody, hit those targets, move that money. And it is a challenging job, to say the least. So that report called for a one-stop shop. This is our effort to start pulling that together. So my team at the LABBC has been doing a lot of this for actually over a decade now. We've always had a big focus on affordable multifamily, but that is really growing as we start to shift, and we're going through a partial rebranding, I'll say, becoming LARA. LABBC will still exist as this network to highlight the case studies, but LARA more broadly is offering a whole range of services for free, okay, meaning funded by the utilities, because they understand that we need to help prepare these projects to participate in the programs. They have regulatory issues to consider. They have ratepayers to be accountable to, shareholders in the case of the investor-owned utilities. And so, there is just complexity here. And so how can we absorb that and make this as simple as possible? So, so I mentioned I've been doing this quite a long time, here in LA. I have a background in real estate. The whole team comes from real estate. So we learn the efficiency piece on the job here. We really try to understand the business and how can we integrate efficiency and resilience and this more what was considered future-oriented stuff into the day-to-day now. So I won't read the whole thing. Capital, emerged from that last poll as a big piece. So I'll skip ahead and save some more time for that. But to give an example, for those of you, I think this is a great project and really typical of what I think we want to see more of. And this was a project we were involved with Century Housing at Florence Avenue Villas. Deed restricted asset, was planning to undergo rehab as part of a resyndication. And we got talking early enough ahead of that we were able to loop in our partners, AEA, their logo there at the bottom, the Association for Energy Affordability. You'll hear them a lot, AEA. They're involved in a lot of the incentive programs that are coming online soon. We looped them in and helped to coordinate development of a scope that resulted in close to, depending how we look at it, 50% energy savings, 25% cost savings. These ratios are always wonky because of prices and so forth, and tremendous value to the tenants. And ultimately, this has become, the project they point to as they go to other assets in their portfolio, where tenants are skeptical. They're saying, "Hey, I don't want to move out to let you do this work in my units. What if I come back and you raise the rent? What if you don't let me back?" We hear these concerns a lot. And so, again, that we hope is part of the benefit of working with us and other third-party partners in this, is helping to create that platform of trust to get tenants on board and move things forward. And I think we'll have a poll about that at the very end. So next, please. So we need to do a ton of these. There's a lot of studies we've seen cited so far. I'm going to talk the next couple slides about a few incentive programs. I'll go more quickly over those because that's really a further step and focus on capital, where it sounds like most of you are interested to be. So where can we start? I think a lot of you are familiar. You've been through, you've done plenty of rehabs, you've done plenty of retrofits. Maybe you weren't necessarily thinking of them as resilience or efficiency retrofits per se. But a lot of what I'm talking about is incremental changes to projects that get done all the time. Having an awareness of, oh, hey, I can ask if there's a heat pump version of this, an all electric heat pump version of this AC unit. Oh, it's only $100 or $200 more, and I'm going to get a warranty, and I'm going to get my building decarbonized. That's what the awareness that we want to help bring as you guys are developing the projects that make sense for your assets and your tenants. That you're aware of, kind of the state of the art, because these things change. The form factors, the weight, the performance, the incentives, all of that is changing all the time, and you guys can't be tracking all of that. And even your contractors, struggle to do that across multiple utility territories, where they're trying to operate. So we collaborate with your contractors and consultants. We are not a replacement for them. But we are a third party, a sounding board, a way in to help you access these programs. And so this is a very simplified, and you may recognize the graphic from the IFA diagram that Megan was showing earlier. But this is kind of mapping that over to incentive programs. So we can have a conversation like, capital is a barrier, I understand. Ability to borrow, limited. We don't maybe have as much experience with this type of work, or we've got, let's start. Always a good idea to get some quick wins and generate, some momentum with the tenants who stand to benefit from this as well, which is a good thing we see. The multiplier effect on putting, money back in the pockets of low-income families. But we've organized this really simply: free and not free. The free programs are pretty good. And what we can help do is basically cobble those together in a way that doesn't feel cobbled together. You'll have a single point of contact that will walk you through a couple of 3 different programs that are free. In fact, they're funded by the surcharge that all of us customers are paying. So we need to make sure that we're participating. Those programs are run, time and materials, labor, is covered by the utilities to get those projects done. You can combine that and build on top of that if there are other things you want to do. And we can look at all this, with no obligation. What we need from you, the obligation that you would have is just to, really engage, give us, give us the information. If you give us the information, we'll hit it back. We'll hit the ball back, and we'll help develop a scope with our network of partners in a process that makes this doable for you, because we know you've got a lot going on. And so we can, again, try to, absorb some of the back and forth and the paperwork and so forth that can make this, or maybe has, if you've done this type of work or participated in these programs in the past, made it not as fun. And these programs, before we move on, all of the stuff that's partially rebated is financeable. And I'm going to talk more about that, and can be combined with these free incentives that are generating savings, right? That will drive the ROI on the projects that maybe don't have the payback that you would find, typically attractive on a given Tuesday. The HVAC stuff, the elevator mods, the roof, those big ticket items that do have an energy benefit and are financeable as such, as part of a package. So we can take that more comprehensive look, leverage the free programs, and we can start there. And by the way, those are open today. So if that sounds of interest, by all means, do contact us. And that's one of the sort of options to plug in. If you want to go deeper, awesome. We're set up to do that. I'll talk about that too. Thank you. So I guess I started talking about the slide already. So what I did not talk about yet, I guess, was deed restricted and NOAA. So where it gets super wonky, in the bottom left corner there, all the alphabet soup of different programs, they all have different requirements, right? Around like affordability level or geographic location. Certain grants have geographic boundaries to them. We can basically paint a picture for you. Somebody's asking a good question. Are these free upgrades available in LA area only? Yes, that is because they're funded by LADWP and SoCalGas. It's just in their joint territory. SoCalGas has some in their territory beyond the joint piece, but yeah, for purposes of today, and thank you for asking this question, I'm talking about, DWP served assets. So if LADWP is your electric utility, then what I'm speaking about is relevant. The financing piece, I will say, though, as I get to that, is intended to be broad-based, and we do hope to engage with other utilities. We're first speaking, of course, with our funder DWP, who is, of course, sponsoring this effort, the pilot phase of this effort. But to broaden the base of participation, so that this is not just an LA thing, because you're asking that because you probably have assets in Long Beach or somewhere else that I would love to work, but for today it's LA. So deed restricted, there are certain programs that are only for deed restricted, that in certain cases can be available to NOAA. On the NOAA side, I think what I wanted to bring up on this slide is that we're really interested in supporting strategies around creation of permanent affordable housing from NOAA. So leveraging the welfare tax exemption program to put that voluntary affordability covenant on the existing market rate assets, preserve that affordability. It's an amazing opportunity to incorporate the types of upgrades that we can help with as part of whatever work you're planning to do. We can help, again, no charge, to help consider this as part of that strategy. I have seen the economics on a few of these projects now. We're working with a couple of different owners, and it's pretty compelling. I mean, the strategy works on its own without the efficiency piece, but if we can intelligently leverage these programs, there's a really kind of neat opportunity there to generate value all around. So we understand, oh, sorry, could you go back? Not every, I just want to say, I understand that not every opportunity is a deep dive. And that's why we have the free programs. Those are going to be lighter touch. The deeper the project, those are going to require some participation, right? Some co-funding. And what I'm hoping we'll get to today too is we really want to understand, what are the prototypes? What are the real, projects? And what I mean by that is, type of ownership, size, year built, and other factors that you guys know about how the asset is owned and financed, that make it more or less easy, right, to retrofit in the way that I'm talking about. But maybe there are groups, and I think there are, that are huge chunks of the market that we really need to understand, and it's time to not shy away from that. And so the smaller mom and pop assets need to be part of this as well. So I think we're going to have a poll. Next slide, please. Great. And so this is, I just wanted to spotlight one of the programs. This is one state program that is intended to kind of goose demand for heat pumps, which is not a new technology. It's existed since the 70s. But basically, this is your option to decarbonize your water and space heating and cooling. The cost savings needs to be determined on a case-by-case basis, but the performance is good, and there's lots of incentives around this. And a big part of what we want to study in these demonstration projects is, what are the value? I mean, Megan talked about co-benefits, right, of these projects. What is the value of this improved indoor environmental quality? If we're getting, better filtration, more comfortable environment, because we've got the envelope sealed up, we've got air conditioning, maybe we didn't have it before. Now, by putting in a heat pump, you gain cooling, maybe not feel the same as regular AC, but hey, it's better than nothing. So this program anyway focuses on that. So it's also a great stepping stone to take a broader look at the opportunities in the building. And so this is a program that we are helping deliver with our partners AEA, who I mentioned earlier. This program is taking applications now. It's available throughout LA County. And this is the map. We will help figure all this out. So don't worry about this. This is here in case you're interested, and we will be sharing the slides. But one thing I'll point out, you see some circles there. Those are around peaker plants and refineries and other point sources of emissions where frontline communities are really disproportionately being impacted. And so we want to focus in those areas, and that's actually a requirement here. So if you have assets in any of these bubbles, or if you'd like us to check, please let us know. And this is a great, like I said, it's available throughout LA County. So this is the stepping stone. From here, we can evaluate and have the conversation about, deep versus light, free versus financed, and go from there. And some of these programs are still in the works. Still need to go to the board, for example. So this is the stepping stone that will help us, get a handle on the real opportunity and plan next steps. Next, please. So this is, I wanted to also mention, in case I know that some of you probably also interface with or control or otherwise responsible for commercial properties. And this whole effort is broader than multifamily. We're talking about, of course, multifamily today with you all. But this encompasses also commercial buildings and all the way up to the downtown skyscrapers. They all are needing to meet the same targets, and so we're working with them as well. So in case you have relationships with small businesses or other organizations that do, we want to talk to them as well. So there are similar programs. The whole everything that I've said applies there as well. Next, please. So we heard that capital is a barrier to projects. Now, this is the question, sort of the next question. What are the barriers to financing? So let's say you have a project. Have you considered, or have you actually, gone and tried to get term sheets to get third-party financing for a project you were trying to do? If so, how'd it go? We understand that these deals are complicated, lots of folks involved, approvals can be difficult. We talked about the need for just general rehab. That doesn't necessarily have a measurable return on investment in the same way that projects that are reducing electricity bills do, right? Their other value is created. We need to start quantifying that. And I think that will help with some of these barriers, but I'll shut up now, give you guys a minute. But this is, the question is, if you have a project and you're thinking about going to get third-party financing, what do you think would be the barriers? Or if you've actually tried to do that, what barriers did you experience?
Right, I'm gonna close the poll in a few seconds here.
So pretty evenly spread. Interesting. Thank you. Great. This is super valuable. This is super valuable. Less of a sort of single issue jumping out, but this is why we're here. This is the set of conversations that we want to have following this. So we've started. As I mentioned, Mayor's Office and DWP asked us to come to them with some thoughts about models to approach this challenge, because we all understand that we're not going to finance an energy transition on charity, right? Or on the backs of ratepayers. We have to find ways to bring private capital that, by the way, wants to be in these projects, wants to be in this space in a huge way. They need a vehicle, right? And so what's the best vehicle to do that? I've been doing this work, for a long time. To kick off that conversation, Mayor's Office worked with McKinsey and Company and Milken Institute to convene this working group. We were part of that as well, participated pretty heavily, and from that went off on this this listening tour. First, starting with our funders to really understand, what is the existing infrastructure that exists to finance this work? Because there's a lot that's out there, and frankly, none of it's working very well, and not as well as it needs to if we're going to get anywhere near progress that will feel, right, that will matter. So let's start with what's there, but not throw it out. How can we work with that? Again, just the same way we want to, incorporate efficiency and resilience into rehab work, we want to, innovate the existing system that exists, work with people, right, to make things work better, that are there, and fill gaps. And so that's how we approach this. So we first met, of course, with the folks that you see listed. I won't go through all of this, but suffice to say, state, federal, local, utilities, advocates, private equity, with C40 cities looking at emerging models. And that's where it got really interesting, because all the stuff that we tried before, and I've done a lot of work on PACE and energy service agreements, and qualified energy conservation bonds, and all the flavors, none of them have really taken hold yet. And we've learned a lot over the years from what hasn't worked. And I think these emerging models are really exciting. So next slide, please. So what we see is, in that emerging model, not to be so mysterious, is what they call a green bank. And it's not a bank. I think I have a slide that says not a bank. But we still use that word. Okay, thanks. Can you go back, please? Because this thing isn't going anywhere. This needs to be an institution this time. We've had pilot programs we've experimented, right, with some success, right, but nothing that's been sustained or scaled over time, and we need to change that. And so through the course of our research and talking to other folks, this model emerged, is that we need a dedicated institution here to give this issue a proper resource. So next, please. And we can skip that. Again, it's not a bank. It is a nonprofit. It will be, I should say, a nonprofit that's purpose-built to connect capital with projects, or projects with capital, depending how you think about it. This slide could go either way. So project demand, that's coming through policy mandates, right? The business case, the moral imperative, the client, whatever the argument is that's driving project demand, and capital from various sources. We've not seen the kind of, again, sustained or scaled investment because the market is so fragmented, is so difficult, and it takes so much time to get to scale and aggregate projects, or it has in the past. And then you get into the complexity of projects, hasn't worked. So we're going to basically leverage our experience, having been doing this, kind of the left-hand side of the page, for over 10 years, and working hard on the right-hand side, learning a lot from what didn't work, to try this again and do it bigger, do it smarter. And that's why we're here with you guys, to help us design this thing the right way, from the ground up, building programs around solutions that we develop together on the demonstration projects that I hope will come out of today, and that we're already developing with hopefully with some of the folks on the call. Next, please. So like I said, we want to ground this whole thing in reality. So we want to focus on demonstration projects. We hear that capital is an interest, so we can help to convene parties that are interested in funding your projects and supporting a dialogue, and we can keep things confidential about what's going to help us get there, and an open, an open conversation, looking at all the tools available to us, or that could be things. What could the city do? What could the utilities do? What if we had federal support? So forth. Really help us understand, and what are these prototypical projects that, if we can solve those, we figured out a huge chunk of the market. Thinking about that, we need to do a lot of these slides. So this is different. This is not a multiple choice. This is a chat brainstorm. So, and I need to speed up, I think, a little bit. So we're going to do a quick chat brainstorm, open up the chat, and what types of projects do you think, or in your portfolio, are typical, that would help us really understand, a chunk of the market?
So I'll start a 30-second timer for the chat brainstorm. Please
Thanks.
feel free to enter your answer in the chat. All right. That was starting to get some answers rolling in. That concludes the chat brainstorm.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Okay, I've got more slides. I'm going to speed up a little bit now. Great. So this slide is just conveying what I was saying earlier. These projects are complex, and this has really prevented folks from investing in this space. What am I investing into? What's going to happen? If I'm trying to measure a return on investment with these projects, it can't look like this. Next slide, please. We need investment grade. I think there's an animation. Projects to be like this. You kind of know what you're getting. Plain vanilla, and that's what LARA Fund will do. will take all of these kind of unique, funky projects and run them through filters until they look like something approaching something that an investor can understand and that we can aggregate, right, and get to scale. And that's how we're going to get to the numbers that are going to make this all work. Next, please. So you guys are familiar with all of this. The idea is to begin by raising funds from public sources, including utilities, and we're in conversations with them already. Next stop, and we're already opening conversations, is with the philanthropic community. And we're seeing lots of more money pouring into that space as well. Not that that is easy by any means, but we intend to make an effort there. And then to complete the picture with private debt. I think I have another slide on this. Next, please. From private debt, targeting an initial raise of $100 million. Now, we think we have identified a initial projected annual pipeline that matches that pretty well. Projects that we kind of have a line of sight, we know are there, and can essentially start to originate, sponsor, develop with the incentive programs that I was speaking to earlier. So that can kind of prime the process and get us talking about financing. So next, please. So that is going to take time. Forming a new nonprofit is not a quick thing. Raising money from multiple sources obviously is not a simple thing either. There are good solutions on the market now. The problem is there are also a lot of bad ones. So what we are going to do in the pilot phase is to create a storefront, which will offer a curated selection of financing options for your projects. And these would be, working with existing providers that have a track record here in LA and or in other markets. But all of that would be white labeled and essentially run through LARA. We intend to negotiate terms and to be able to offer a very simplified, essentially set of offerings in the near term. And so we're targeting a Q1 launch for this. And this is going to have the same look and feel as the eventual full launch. Next slide, please. Which will occur when the entity is formed, when we have raised the money. And at that point, nothing will change, from your perspective, from the customer's perspective, but we will offer additional products, right? We'll be able to offer subsidized products, backstopped with a loan loss reserve, perhaps, or some other type of credit enhancement. We may be able to offer more generous underwriting than we will without the type of subsidy that we will be putting in place with the full launch. So date TBD on this, but phase one, the pilot, is in process now, and we're hoping to have that online, as I said, in Q1, to bring you some real options. These demonstration projects are feeding into this. So now is the time, for us to be looking at projects, really understand the economics and the other co-benefits that we should be trying to assign economic value to, and line this thing up now. So again, designing this from the project upward. There's just a loan loss reserve diagram. I think you guys are familiar with this, but this is what one of the ideas we're discussing with the utilities as a use of their funds that they would like to see. Next, please. So I mentioned we've done a bunch of studies. Others have done really great studies. Ours focused on answering a pretty specific question. And I don't want to overstate things to say that we know who is most in need, and defining that. What we mean by that is that they have, in this case, specific instance, a deadline coming up for this existing buildings energy and water efficiency ordinance. The deadline was just extended, but the requirements remain in effect. So the reporting got pushed out, but the intent is that it's time to be moving forward on projects, and at the very least doing an audit and performing some retrocommissioning to drive some performance and understand what does that go forward, capital plan look like? So we've done a bunch of research to help essentially kick off conversations where we can come in, know quite a bit about a portfolio or an asset, and can quickly connect because we've pre-screened for the different programs that I mentioned earlier. Next, please. We don't need to belabor this, but one of the data sources we looked at was CalEnviroscreen, but we used, actually the team at UCLA used some pretty neat tools to pull data from multiple sources, do physics-based modeling to actually understand, what are the potential savings and costs. So we have a lot of great information that we can share as we get a sense from you guys for, what do you have? What are you interested in doing? We can bring to that, initial collaboration. Next, please. Thank you all for bearing with us. I know this is a lot. And so I think this is the last chat brainstorm. And, with these demonstration projects, what is important for us to understand, right? Like if we want to attract a bunch of investment to this space, what data do we need to start generating that we don't have now, right? Like what's the value of fill in the blank, decarbonizing, decarbonizing an asset, getting fossil fuels, right? We're going to have, you won't have any issues if there are gas leaks and so forth, that would be gone. How do we start to assign value to that? Some groups are doing research on that. Maybe, yes, somebody just brought up Emerald Cities Collaborative. They're a great organization. And so I'm trying to keep up with the research myself, just like you, everybody. So yeah, who's doing great work on, exactly impacts on rent, are there good studies on this, or can we start tracking this over time, right? Can we put in place design now and make that part of the agreement, right? That when we work together, we create a simple process. I don't want to make it onerous, but so that we can track things like this over time. Great, thank you for sharing these resources, guys. So what else would help to kind of start to generate a data set that would make it easier for you guys to get the support, to get the capital, to get what you need, to do more of these projects? If you had this in your back pocket, man, it would be easier. Okay. Great, let's keep moving. I know we're at the end. So just to reiterate, we've got a bunch of ways that you can plug in. We want to make this super easy. This is for deed restricted or NOAA. I also mentioned commercial. So if you guys have relationships with commercial properties, we'd like to talk with them as well, hear from them. Deep or light, we understand not every project is net zero, or at least not, to start with. And so we want to, be cognizant of that and use that as a starting point. We want to understand these prototypes. So thank you for everybody for contributing your ideas there. There's a good question. Are we a clearinghouse collaborative or a green fund? So that's a great question. In phase one, we are a clearinghouse or a collaborative, which is a white labeled clearinghouse where behind that we will have partners because we will not have the subsidy in place until we form the entity, we've raised the money and so forth. We are raising a fund. That is what the full launch will be. And that is what we are in discussions with utilities and other partners about standing up. So phase one is more of the clearinghouse collaborative, but we will provide all the same support, the same, no obligation customer service. That will be staffed by my team, funded by DWP, not by any of the partners. So we will be creating this neutral space to discuss options before making any connections. And that's the same deal on the side with contractors. That's, really important. So thank you. My colleague Madhavi just sent through an interest form. It's super quick. So this just lets you, tell us a little bit about what you have. And, it can seem hard. It can seem not enough, but you guys, are all in this for the right reasons. And that's why I love this work and working in the affordable housing community, because you guys get this. We have great power. We have great power. All of us do. And with that comes great responsibility. To quote my favorite philosopher, I've been reading a lot of Spider-Man these days. So with that, next slide. Thank you. Let's get engaged. Let's get engaged. That's the demonstration project interest form. It's there in the chat, as well as there linked. We will be sending follow-up as well. With that, I have time to stick around. We're just at 3 o'clock, I think 2:59. So I'm happy to stick around for as long. I think I have about 15 minutes.
Dave, there's a question. Is there a retrofit financing model structure you are proposing?
We are going to ask the market. We're familiar with all of the sort of products and structures that are on the market. I think each are interesting and have a potential place, but the answer to what is the specific structure will come through these demonstration projects. That's what I'm really excited about. In terms of the tools that we have PACE financing, we have energy service agreements, we have on-bill financing. Somebody brought up in the chat brainstorm ability to pass through certain repayment obligations to tenants. There are mechanisms that enable that. So all of these are tools. We will provide a platform, educate folks on the facts. Exactly, demonstration proves funding, and that's what the demonstration phase will do. So we'll be working with existing players in the initial phase who have been in the space for a long time, funding projects of various types, bringing those together onto a single platform, those players that have those relationships, that have the process in place again. So we're not trying to compete or build anything from scratch where it exists already. So the platform will be collaborative and demonstration first, right, to prove the funding. So these things are working in parallel. Yeah, so we're starting with a pilot, trying to benefit from past experience and others' past experience as well. What's working in other markets, asking through an RFI process and ultimately an RFP, what should we do? We have a platform, how should we use it? And so really appreciate all of your input. Wonderful. Well, thank you all for making the time. I really appreciate the input and the discussion, and I hope to hear a lot of input forms, demonstration project interest forms coming out of this. Thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it.